Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second roundtable. I'm off screen so that you can see our four illustrious guests joining me. I'm Dora Muhammad, Congregation Engagement Director at the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. This is our second roundtable focused on racial equity, and we're focused today on sacred lands, sacred lives, the struggle to end desecration of Native and African American sacred ancestral grounds. So joining me today, we have Eli Burke. Disclaimer, he is one of our board members we are blessed to have at the Virginia Interfaith Center, but he also serves at the Baptist General Convention of Virginia. He's Director of Health, Social Justice, and Men's Ministries. A lot of hats he wears. Also with us is Chris French. He is representing the Protect Hanover Coalition, and he's also a member of the NAACP's Hanover branch, the Environmental Justice Committee. And then lastly, joining with us are two members of the Coalition to Save Historic Thoroughfare. We have with us Minister Delaney Washington, who's the senior pastor at Oakland Baptist Church and one of the descendants of the founding families of the town of Thoroughfare. And we have Sheila Hansen. She's Shawnee from Shenandoah and Ohio, and also founder, I believe it's founder, maybe co-founder, but founder of the United Tribes of Shenandoah. So thank you all for joining us. And with that, I will turn it over to Eli, who will be talking with us about an initiative at the Baptist General Convention that is one of our primary things that we support as part of our racial equity work, and it's their Sacred Spaces initiative. Eli?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am so glad to be a part of this discussion. Be having that discussion with other persons who share the same concerns. So to make this easier for me and hopefully for you, I'm going to do a very short PowerPoint that introduces sacred spaces. And I'll probably interject a few things during that, but for the most part, you'll just see what we'll just go through the presentation. And should be sharing the screen. All right. So the initiative of the Baptist General Convention. So for those who don't know, in case you're not familiar with Baptist General Convention of Virginia, we've been around since 1899. We have more than 1,000 churches in our membership. And of course, social justice is one of many areas that we delve in. So again, we represent the entire Commonwealth. So the full initiative is titled Preservation of African American Churches, Cemeteries, Historic Structures, Associated Land, and Landmarks. Again, it's a long name, but there are a lot of things that we need to do more, and not only do, but do more of as we try to complete this work. So as you can see, our graphic, we're working with churches, of course, with cemeteries and other graveyards, and also with historic structures like schools that were on church properties or in the communities to try to make sure they are preserved. So, and I'll read some of this. The Sacred Spaces Initiative enables Baptist General Convention to provide training for new and current church historians. These historians will learn about research strategies, documentation methods, how to archive and preserve the historical documents related to the church, cemetery, school, and other historical artifacts associated with that church. So we are, we'll do at least 4. We've done right now. We've probably done 6 in the last year. We just launched a year ago. And so, of course, our name, historically, the church has been that sacred place of refuge and hope, and it remains so today. So that applies to the church, the burial grounds. Also, for some were also the first schools in their areas, or the first schools were often adjacent to the church property because that was where there was land. So we're doing that, and we recognize beginning that we have some churches that are way along in the history. We have a group of historians that have been doing this for many years, but they tend to be in our urban churches and larger churches. But the rest of the churches have informal structures and need assistance with preserving. And many have asked prior to this initiative. So now we will address that as a part of the initiative. So the key pieces are documenting, first of all, and archiving the history of BGCVA. and our associations and individual churches. So since 1899, there's a lot of history. So we are in the process and will be in the process for a while of compiling that. And even we have several people working at the same time, but we are going to model what we want to see our churches and associations. Like I said, we're more than 1,000 churches, but we're organized in 29 associations of churches around the Commonwealth of Virginia. So a primary outcome as we go through the next years would be to create a digital archive of the history of Baptist General, but also the churches participating in the project. Many of our churches are in extremely rural areas. Many of them have their documents stored on some at the church, but a lot of those documents are stored in people's houses, etc. So if a building goes up, a lot of times the history goes up. We're already hearing stories about our churches who've lost their documents through a fire or somebody's descendant not knowing what it is and getting rid of it. So, and then again, and of course, we have a survey form that will be up for persons that are interested. And it's the right thing at the right time. The interest in this has grown tremendously, even though we started 1 week before a pandemic. We have been very viable through a series of webinars, and we have already acquired many partners, but we're hearing stories every day of the challenges that our people are having with, particularly one of the major things that's coming to the front is needing assistance with their cemeteries, graveyards, or other burial places. There is this area of encroachment that is happening. I just learned of a new one in Chesterfield yesterday. And we also, when we came to this project almost 3 years ago, when Dominion was planning to run the pipe and others were running a pipeline through Buckingham County, we happen to have many churches in that Union Camp area of Powhatan. So through our work with Virginia Interfaith Center and many other organizations, we were part of the advocacy for stop, slow it down. And as you know now, it's not happening, but it would have displaced many of our members' farms. Many of them have active farms, many of them have land that's been in the family for many, many years. So that got us started with that. And out of that, we began talking to Dominion, and out of that, we came up with this initiative as something they could do that would help similar communities, because I'll call it encroachment, is happening in so many ways, whether it be a garbage dump coming into somebody's area, etc. But part of one of the desired outcomes is that we will have people that would know their boundary lines, know their particular history, be able to articulate that to persons when they start talking about what they're going to do in a particular area. So it's a large order, but we intend to stay with it. And also, as we looked at existing information about our churches, which are African American, we found that many of the historic organizations around the Commonwealth have not really been engaged with, for, or by some of these communities. And that when one is doing research, much of what is happening in these communities is not recorded or very easily recorded. We are very fortunate to be also working with Ryan Smith at VCU and also Dr. Turner out of Yale on helping us put together our documentation and also making sure that we are connected to the places that would help us to advance this initiative so that our persons are very much aware of what their rights are, and also they need to learn how to protect their heritage, which is heavily invested in the church and community and those structures connected with their churches. And with that, I will stop. I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the presentations.
Thank you so much, Eli. That was absolutely great. And you touched on something that really feeds right into Chris French's presentation, and it was the need for communities to communicate with one another, but also really to even just make it a community involved endeavor. You know, I think that when people think of African American cemeteries, it's easy to say, well, my family's not buried there, so this isn't my fight. Or I don't go to that church, so this isn't my concern. But in the community of Brown Grove in Hanover, they actually have set an example of what it looks like when it becomes truly a collective community priority. Brown Grove historically has had over 60 years of environmental justice. It was established by freedmen shortly after the end of the Civil War. And so there's just so much of a collective history. And so Chris is going to take us into their current battle against the Wegmans development. Chris, you have it.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for the opportunity. Hopefully you're able to see the screen. Can you guys see the PowerPoint that I've got pulled up?
Not yet. There
How's
you go.
that look?
Yes.
All right. The beauty of modern technology. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through mostly visual pictures and everything and show everybody what we're looking at. But the site that's been considered for this Pentagon-sized warehouse facility, this distribution center, is just about 7 miles outside of the town of Ashland, Virginia. It's off of Ash Cake Road and Sliding Hill Road. It's about 15 miles north of the Richmond city limits. On this particular map, you can see just to the west, this is I-95, and Brown Grove is distinctly listed on the USGS map. There's been a lot of industrial encroachment into the community, which you can kind of see represented by the municipal airport and associated airport complex. There is a construction landfill that's literally in people's backyards. Concrete pipe and precast facility, and a number of other industrial complexes. What makes this area so attractive, I think, for development is that you're literally bracketed by two interchanges with I-95, and I-295 is just to the south of it. But one of the things that we've seen, if you just look at just some of the most basic information that's available, is that this site is very challenged. And the reason that the community established here after the Civil War is because it was poor land. It's full of swamps. It's literally a flat plateau in this topographic region. The water doesn't drain anywhere. And so we have extensive wetlands found throughout the area as a result. We talked a little bit about this. Some of this has been covered already, but I think it's really important to kind of bring up some of the major issues that we've had challenges throughout this entire process. There is a tremendous amount of politics driving this project. There's a fictitious number that the state has on the number of jobs they're trying to create. And with this development would be the creation of 700 jobs, which we're fully supportive of, but just in a better location, one that does not encroach upon a historic Black community that has a long and deep history with the landscape that it lives upon. Even before all of this was happening, Brown Grove has been suffering from industrial encroachment and everything else. These are some examples of articles that have been published either in the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Down at the College of William and Mary, there was a PhD dissertation done that talks about the Black life experience in Hanover County. And all of this is very deep background for basically validating the existence of the community. As Eli mentioned earlier, the spiritual center of the community is the Baptist Church, which is located directly across the road from this proposed development. On the actual site directly across from the church are the remains of the historical segregation area school. One success that we just had as of yesterday is that the Department of Historic Resources, with one of their volunteer citizen boards, just approved unanimously the establishment of what's being called the Brown Grove Residential Community Historic District. The only one that I'm familiar with that's very similar to this is in Union Hill, Buckingham County, and that was a 4-year process to get that established. The Brown Grove community, working with our consultants and advisors, pulled this off in less than 6 months. They learned from the experiences that they had in Union Hill. People from there shared information. And what's really unique about this is not only is the outline showing, it's showing 2 different areas. And this is a result of the encroachment that you have seen within the community, because I-95, as I mentioned, cut the community in half. I mean, you can obviously see the type of development that has occurred in this area. So there's a really compelling story that goes into this, but you can also see that the parts of it, especially the eastern section that remains of the district, is incredibly rural. And it's also tied into other historical features in the area, like Slash Church. On the site that's to be developed is believed to be an old tavern that Patrick Henry once helped raise the militia with at one point. So there's a lot going on here. I'm going to blow through this pretty fast. Most of this is pictures, but there's significant wetland issues, and that's where the environmental element really comes into play, is that Wegmans has to get environmental permits from both the state of Virginia as well as the federal government. There's been a lot of shenanigans going on with this, but this is what the original wetland delineation looked like. After negotiations in the field with an attorney and others, they reduced those numbers of impacts substantially, and just wetlands mysteriously disappeared. After the public got involved, and this is the public at large, not just Brown Grove, but the surrounding residential community members, they really got engaged initially because of the wetland issues and the transportation issues and safety concerns, and then everybody kind of came together. But this is where I got involved, is the wetlands at first. I'm a former DEQ employee, and I began to look at this and it's like, none of this makes any sense. And the more digging we did, the more we begun to realize rules were not being followed by the state and the federal governments in implementing their regulatory programs. And this is just some examples of how wetlands disappeared. This little hammerhead area right over here connected to this actually is this area. And you can see that they mysteriously just cut out things as you went along. And that's still relevant even to this day, even though the current situation is better than what it was due to tremendous public pressure. They're still undercounting enormous amounts of wetlands. And the most obvious thing, I think, for anybody who's not familiar with wetland science, we all know that water does not stop at the edge of a red line like this. And if you've got a natural connection in this area, and that dark line right there is actually a ditch that goes from one side to the other side. Hey, buddy.
Our new neighbors are in the backyard.
Oh, cool. Go play with them for a few minutes. Let me finish this up. I gave you guys a warning that this might happen. So where we're wrapping up right now with this is that there are currently 2 lawsuits that are happening. There's one at the county level with a zoning appeal, and there is a formal one against the state of Virginia with the DEQ and the State Water Control Board, who issued the wetlands permit. We just learned over the past couple of days that the Army Corps of Engineers has also issued the federal permit without telling anybody about it other than the applicant. And so we're looking at a potential appeal on that side. With that being said, coalition building and everything is a lot of work. It's a lot of communication. And it's also that effort of reaching out to people like circumstances like this, which is why I'm so honored to be here today, because we're hoping that not only can we help other people repeat the successes that we've had to date, but we're also hoping to learn from you guys and to be able to bring more resources to make what is a very winnable situation achievable. And so with that, I'll be happy to kind of step back. I know that there's been some things in the chat box. I haven't had an opportunity to look at them yet, but I will be happy to address any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much for that. So when I first began this work, at the beginning of the year, from learning of the work that Eli was going to be leading, began thinking about how to support this, and try to do this statewide so that there's some seamless kind of coordination. And then lo and behold, I found out that there is a fight right in my own county that I was not aware of. And so the next two presenters I've had the blessing of meeting and now working with for about a month. So the first is Minister Delaney Washington. And so this is a very, it's become personal for me, but for him, it is his family. It is absolutely his family. And a community has grown around his family to support their struggle. And so I'm very honored that he has joined us today. And so Delaney, if you please want to share what you would like.
First off, I just want to thank you for having me here today. It's really been a blessing, even as we've been going through this latest struggle, to just meet so many different people and to find out that we're not alone in this fight. I've been the pastor of the Oakland Baptist Church for the last 2 years. I've actually been a member of Oakland Baptist Church in Thoroughfare, which has been my entire life. My family, my mother and father actually grew up there, my grandparents. So we've had a large community. I've been blessed to be at Oakram, blessed to have me as a pastor there. I've served in various roles at Oakram, as far as a youth pastor, a Sunday school teacher, trustee, assistant pastor. And so I've been blessed to be in my community, the place I grew up in, and also to serve at my church. Thoroughfare is a small area, a small town area, which is right outside of Haymarket, Virginia, a couple of miles outside of that. And it was founded by Native Americans and African Americans who were freed and also enslaved peoples. My family has been in that area since the 1700s, at least that long. And so I've been blessed to grow up in an area that had so much family around. We've been I was surrounded by my grandparents and my aunts, my uncles, cousins, so many different people around. And the one thing that we grew up in Oakram, in Thoroughfare, was understanding that we always put God first in everything. It was always God first, and we had our family. And so that was a big part of our heritage in growing up. It's just been a part of us to where, me, for myself growing up, I never had a doubt that there was a God. And my family blessed us in that. And, I can remember things even growing up myself, going to the church, where it was always a blessing for me to be at the church, because it was a place where, we had great pastoring, great teaching, great music, and a great fellowship between everybody who was there. I have a lot of strong memories. When I was growing up in the church, one of my earliest memories, in fact, of being at Oakram in Thoroughfare was being about 4 years old and standing beside my grandmother at the door. She was an usher. And even though I didn't know what I was doing, she still had me there beside her anyway. But it was just that love that was shared between all of us that were there. We grew up understanding the importance of faith and having a strong faith and standing up for the right things. We were taught accountability, responsibility. And so those are the things that have been carried in me, but they were passed down to me from my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. We have a very strong legacy of that. I wanted to say all that because just so you have an understanding about who I am and why this particular issue is so important to me. I appreciate the fact of my ancestors who had to go through so much. They were slaves, Native Americans, and they were people who were looked down upon, but they still had a strong faith and a strong belief in each other. The Church of Thoroughfare, Oakram, was founded in 1865, right after the Civil War. And I always think about how those people had to go through, my ancestors had to go through so much, being put down, being disrespected, being enslaved, or, even those who went through the Trail of Tears. And so it's important to me about what's happening in Thoroughfare. I personally live right now in Fauquier, but Thoroughfare is always my home. It will always be my home. Right now, we're going through a situation where we've had an encroachment of developers in the area. In particular, this we have 3 cemeteries in particular that kind of stand out. One is called the Scott Cemetery, one is called the Potter's Field, and one is called the Allen Fletcher Cemetery. Well, we've had a desecration in particular at one cemetery, which is called the Scott Cemetery. So much so that the owners of the property, which is the Broad Run Brewery, have actually taken and desecrated about 100 graves. They basically took the land that was there and plowed over top of everything. Any field stones that were there, they're all gone. The land is completely flat. So any graves that were there have all been bulldozed over, which to me, it's a very hurtful thing to see that happen to your ancestors, to see people who went through so much and to see them desecrated like this, even in death, they can't get the respect that they couldn't get in life. And to have somebody go through that, and and a little bit further down there, these 2 cemeteries, the Scott Cemetery and the Potter's Field, are on the same road. A little bit further down where the Potter's Field is that particular cemetery has a gate blocking us from getting down to the cemetery. The owners of the brewery say they own the property, and so what they've done, they put a gate up there and said if we want to have any more burials there, we'd actually have to cut through the cemetery in order to bury somebody there, which is ridiculous. We've been using that road for the last 200 or 300 years now, but they have it blocked off. So we're in a fight with them as far as that's concerned. They also own the property that's adjacent to that particular cemetery, and that's also under threat too of development and even them encroaching upon that cemetery as well. We have a 3rd cemetery, which is the Allen Fletcher Cemetery. We have a different builder, a different developer over there who wants to put houses on top of Native American graves that we just discovered recently, that there's a lot of graves out there that have not been registered, haven't been recorded. We had an archaeologist out there who actually found these graves, but that hasn't deterred the developer. He still wants to put homes there, still wants to, as far as I'm concerned, basically wipe everything out. Again, it's been a hurtful thing, but through all this too, we still give God the praise, no matter what, because there have been a lot of things that have been done in the dark, and now these things are coming to light. And so, if it hadn't been, unfortunately, one of my aunts passed away earlier this year, that kind of got the ball rolling for us because we were actually going to bury her in the Potter's Field. And that's when all this stuff started happening. We started pulling on one thread. As we started pulling on one thread, more things started to become more revealed to us. There are some pictures I think that Dora has, which shows that at the Allen Fletcher Cemetery, the developer there has actually dug a trench around the cemetery. He got upset because of a meeting that we had at our church, and I guess his way of striking back at us was to try to dig a trench basically around the cemetery, which I don't know what he was trying to do, but basically, like, he called himself, I guess, having his own archaeologist there to find these graves. But either way, the thing about it is that we have been desecrated, we have been put down, and unfortunately, this is not a new occurrence. This is something that we find out more is happening all around. As I started researching, my brother and I especially have been researching a lot more, and I've been seeing things happening all around the country. It feels like just an emphasis of trying to destroy our past history, because when we talk about thoroughfare, we talk about what everybody went through. This is a history of America. These are people who had to fight through, people who had to find a way to make it from day to day, but they still never lost their faith. They still kept holding on tight. And even the name of the church, Okram, talks about how these people were all bound together. Okram, in fact, talks about a binding together of people, a binding together of fibers, but it's ironic because it talks about a binding together of people. And so from our heritage, a Native American heritage, African American heritage, these people were bound together, looking to have a better way of life for themselves and also for their children too. So right now, we're in this fight, and we haven't had a lot of help from Prince William County. There's talk about purchasing back the one piece of property where the Allen Fletcher Cemetery is, but nothing is in writing. It's talk so far as I'm concerned, because nothing is in writing. We haven't heard anything about the other piece yet, but the Prince William County attorney, the county attorney, saying that there's nothing that she can do, even though this is a felony. Everybody agrees that it's wrong for the desecration of the Scott Cemetery. But because they couldn't determine any criminal intent, they didn't see a way for them to pursue it, which again, I still believe that there is a way for them to do it, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of push to make that happen. Hopefully, I think some things may be happening now that haven't come to fruition yet, but we're looking forward to those things happening. But regardless of what happens, we know that I believe firmly that at the end of the day, God's will be done. And so, it's hard because I think about in the book of James, he talks about counting all your trials, as that you count it all as joy, because it develops perseverance. It makes us more mature. So even as we go through this time right now, God is making us more mature. He's brought friends around us. He's brought prayer warriors. He's brought people who want to contribute funds, and even having Sheila is just meeting new friends, and we find that we're all working together on this thing. So what Satan wants to have for evil, we know that God is going to work it out for good. And so we're thankful for that. So anyway, thank you for the time, and I know that Dora's putting up our coalition page, which we are the Coalition to Save Historic Thoroughfare, and also our GoFundMe link also too. And we appreciate anything that anybody can do to help us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Delaney. And before I go to Sheila, you mentioned the photo. So even though I have a link there for the photo essay that I did, this one isn't included. So I'm going to share my screen real quickly, just so people can get an idea of the latest desecration that occurred this past week. So this is the Allen Fletcher Cemetery, and this is the trench that has been dug around the edges. And with that, as you talked about sort of your family's strength in going through this, I immediately thought that, well, there's no better, pure, clearer example of resilience through generations than our First Nations, who have experienced and survived genocide in this country. And so I first met Sheila at a community meeting that Oakland Baptist Church hosted. And I had not even met her before. I was sitting across the church, but I immediately was drawn to her spirit, the strength that she had as she was sitting there amongst the contingent of First Nations that came to support. Some were residents, but some came from across the country to support, which spoke volumes. And I learned Sheila has been educating me. And so I look forward to what she's sharing with us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a critical, a vicious, horrible attack on a community that deserves so much more, on their ancestors. And why would Indian people get involved in this? Because historically, the Black people and Indian people were thrown into the same bucket. One has to only look at a little bit at the Virginia history to understand that. Everything from the first head of the Bureau of Vital Statistics, Dr. Plecker, who was a white supremacist, who stated that there are no Indians in the state of Virginia. This was 1923. He remained in that office until 1946. And 1947, he went into spirit world in Richmond. But the damage that he did to Indian people in this state still exists today. If you tried to say you were Indian on your birth certificate, it was a felony. Many people spent a year in prison because they said, we're Indian, why don't you recognize us that way? So the history is shameful, but it's truth. And it's time that the citizens of this country hear the truth. And it's also time that we as a silent people begin to stand up and be strong and say, we are here, we've always been here, and speak our truth. And so this incident in Thoroughfare has many, many, many different branches on this tree. And I am honored to be a part of it. I found out that the Shenandoah Shawnee were absolutely an integral part of Ye Indian Thoroughfare back in the 1700s. You know, it's really hard for us to even know our history. We're lucky if we can go back to 1820s. And so some of our Black brothers and sisters have the same problem. But also I want to say this is a very spiritual fight that we are in. Not only are we dealing with graves and bones in graves. Now, none of us have had any responsibility for where these folks were buried. But I can guarantee you that whoever put them into the ground did so with a real purpose. And there was a real reason behind why they did that. So in the spiritual respect, this is in our teachings. When a body goes into the ground and decomposes, it enriches the ground. Up from that ground can grow grass and bushes and even trees. So within those things that grow up are the essence of our old ones and the essence of our ancestors who are buried there. And then when the rabbits or the squirrels or the foxes come along and they eat some of that grass, whatever grows up there, then they also become the essence. So they are our relations. When the Scott Cemetery was leveled and all the trees were torn down, basically they removed the essence of the old ones that were buried there. You know, this is why it is so important that wetlands, that's another thing. When they destroy wetlands, there are developers who give away land somewhere else so they can recreate the wetlands. I believe it, Mr. French, I believe that's correct. How can you recreate the trees that were there and the animals that were there? Impossible, impossible. The people of Thoroughfare deserve the respect and the recognition of who they are, who they have always been. And furthermore, they deserve the capability to visit the grave sites of their old ones. We're not asking for these graves to be removed. We absolutely strongly are against that. And because of some of it is because of the reasons that I told you before about how they become part of everything that's on this earth. All land is sacred and all life is sacred. When we walk on this earth, on our Mother Earth, we are walking in the footsteps of all those who have gone before us, and they're speaking to us. In our time of trouble, we call on their help because their lives, they have lived it, and we feel that they are around us and they will always be with us. So this battle has come to the Prince William County. They refuse to make anybody accountable for what they've done. And, you know, it's ridiculous, really. I mean, what kind of a human heart do these developers have? And Mr. French, I believe we're dealing with the same thing that you're dealing with. It's called money, politics, and development. It was told to me when I was small in a prophecy that we would be facing these times. Never did I ever think I would be still on this earth to have to experience such a thing. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. So we continue with this fight as Indian people fighting this across the country. Is the same thing. Maybe 2021, we can say that this is be the year of our ancestors. They're calling us. They're calling for our help. and they're calling for their recognition and their respect. So we absolutely walk side by side, our brothers and sisters in Thoroughfare, until this is completely redone. And all of those artifacts and stones and those markers that were removed are returned. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Before we go to Q&A, I want to do two things real quickly. So people couldn't see the photo that I showed of the trench, and I think it's because my video was off. So I'm going to try that one more time, and hopefully you will. I added it to just a slide. You're able to see it now, I'm hoping. So that's the trench. And then lastly, again, before we go to, I'm very moved by what Sheila shared on so many levels. And again, this is, my spirit was drawn to her immediately during the Oak Rim community meeting. And so after that meeting, Reverend Delaney took me on a tour so I can take the pictures that I wanted to take. And when we approached the Peyton Cemetery, I don't think he realized this, but he walked in very comfortably, started pointing out who was where and his family and explaining everything and the layout. And I stayed back on the other side of the fence. And I felt this overwhelming, like I didn't have a right to yet. There's this overwhelming sense of, and I didn't have the language, so that's why I'm struggling to even say how I felt at that moment, but it took me a while. I felt like I couldn't just go into this space. I felt the sanctity of this space. I felt the spirit of those who had been laid to rest there. But in hearing how Sheila described it in the sort of the continuity of the essence of life, it wasn't just the past, it was their presence. They were present still. And it took me a while. And when I shared this with Sheila, the first time that we spoke, and she said that there's a protocol, you needed permission, spiritual permission. And I said, yes, that's how I felt. And so I just wanted to share that, because when she talked about when she asked the question, I don't know what kind of human heart these people have. I had just this morning spoke with Preservation Virginia, and we were talking about that. And I was saying how those of us who have a respect for humanity really can't fathom those who have no respect for humanity. We cannot understand how you come to these spaces of the remains that are indeed deserving of reverence and respect, and you have none. And so with that, I want to open up for some questions. If you all have any, please drop it in the chat or the Q&A. I do know that Reverend Delaney has to leave soon for an appointment. So if you have any questions for him, if you can drop them in first. I want to thank him for his time, and I'm going to see if I can show everyone so that when we ask questions, that should be good. There we go. There are no questions. This always happens at the roundtable. Just the presentations are so meaningful. So it's okay, because I will get the questions later. I'm going to put my email address in. This always happens. Definitely, please give me your feedback. I'm going to drop my email address in. And then, so since we do have some time, before I do my closing thoughts, since there are no questions, want to ask each of you, and Delaney, you can start, so then you can leave as you need to, sort of what's next for you? What's next in the fight that people should be aware of? I've dropped sort of all the places where people can stay informed, but just sort of talk about what's next, and then I'll sort of wrap up with a closing thought on Juneteenth and its connection to all of this.
Well, next for us is that there has been talk, talk from the county about purchasing the one piece of property, which is where the Alan Fletcher Cemetery is. So there's been talk about purchasing it from the current owner. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but there is talk that, from what I understand, that the board is 100% behind it. I understand there were a few holdouts, but I understand at this point in time that that everybody is behind that initiative to make that happen. So we're hoping to see that happen. Again, nothing has been put into writing yet. So until it's in writing, until I see it happen, I won't believe it until I actually see it. But that's what's supposed to happen there. As far as the other two cemeteries concerned, there's still an ongoing battle with that. I haven't heard of anything at all happening with that. And there may be maybe some other outside forces may be coming in to help to address that particular situation. You know, we're asking everybody to reach out to the board of supervisors. They can reach out to their senators, state senators, anybody at all that they have any sort of connection with like that, to make them aware about what's happening there and about how it is disrespectful and how this can happen to anybody. That's what's so bad. It can really happen to anybody. It just seems to happen to us in particular, but it can really happen to anybody. And so this isn't just a one person fight or one group fight. This is an everybody fight. You know, everybody's got to get involved with this. And, you know, even if it just takes a little bit of sending an email out, you know, that would be great. So, but that's where we are right now. And that's what we hope. We keep continually praying that it will all work out. And I know it's all going to work out anyway in the end. I know that for a fact. But, you know, I always believe that faith without works is dead. So we need to have faith, but we need to put some works in behind it also too.
And to that, so to answer his question and the question in the chat, the work that's going to come behind this faith. So I had mentioned how at the center, our racial equity work is something I'm trying to coordinate statewide. So we have established racial equity working groups in each of our 10 regional chapters. And so we're going to be tasking them, they're going to be working with me, but to really research within their region, their different counties, where are the threatened cemeteries? Not just to identify it, but then to support what Eli talked about and what Chris talked about, and is to really begin to support these congregations and these families. Because again, that's why I wanted to emphasize these coalitions that's been forming. It's not a family's fight, it is our fight, it's our collective legacy, our collective history. So looking for people to support these cemeteries and these communities, whether it's one church that's connected to it, or there is no church that's connected to it, but that we take on that responsibility as our own to learn the process of making this the cemetery become registered if it meets the qualifications to be eligible in the state registry, in the national registry. That is our assignment at the center that we are going to be working around statewide. So if you want to get involved in that, email me and I'll plug you into our racial equity working groups for the summer. That's one of the 4 issues that they'll be tasked with, but it is a significant one. And we're just going to begin to lay that groundwork over the summer, again, to provide support for families like Delaney's and communities like the Brown Grove community. So I hope you will join us in this. I definitely think it is going to be very beneficial and very satisfying to everyone's soul to do this work together.
Thank you too, again, Dora. I really appreciate everything.
Just so happy, honestly, that I connected to you. So again, the fact that it's right here, you know, it's hard, especially being in quarantine, seeing things that you want to support, but you can't really get to, you know, so it's like the fact that I can actually drive and support and be a part of it is, again, it's been very, very fulfilling for me to be able to bring my gifts and talents to this fight for you, to bring the organization to this fight to support. And then with the other places, when I literally, as I'm talking about one, it'll be other people that's listening in the conversation will say, well, did you know about this? Did you know about this? So I know as soon as we begin to open up the aperture on this, we're going to see just really how horrific this sense of denigration and desecration has happened across the Commonwealth. Because I think in the chat, someone mentioned Providence, I scrolled up, but another church. So I don't know, but I will be researching it. So thank you for putting it in the chat.
Go.
Thank you, Delaney.
Thank you.
So it is really important, again, that we do this coordinated so that I think, as Eli said, you can learn from what one community is doing, you know, so that this process isn't sort of reinventing the wheel every time. And that we begin to learn the barriers, how to navigate certain things, gain the wisdom, like Delaney had shared and Sheila had shared. The county has not been, they don't know. They do not know. And so thankfully for us being a statewide organization, we have statewide resources. And so I've begun reaching out to those. And so again, we're going to begin to build this infrastructure to help the Sacred Spaces Initiative and bear that in all across the state so that there's a sort of a wealth of knowledge that everyone can tap into. I have a question. Will an email circulate that alerts us to when or where links to the recording is posted? Yeah, so the roundtables will all be posted on our YouTube, and I will send a link out with everything that was shared today, all the links that were shared today to everyone who was registered. But if you ever miss any of our public meetings, events, they're always uploaded to our YouTube channel. So we only have a few minutes left. So I want to give Chris, Eli, and Sheila, because I know Sheila got something going on tomorrow, sort of just a few minutes to talk about what's next for them. So Chris, do you want to go and talk about what's next? Oh, Eli's unmuted. So Eli, you start.
Okay. What's next for me is, I think I said in my presentation that as we've been getting involved in this work and receiving the surveys back from our churches, the cemeteries have come up as a great priority. So one of the next things we will do, our next webinar, which will be in August, and we'll set a date within the week, we'll focus on the cemetery. So I'll need Reverend Washington and others to come and share their stories. There are many others, like I said, I'm getting cemetery stories more than anything else right now, all over the Commonwealth. So one of the things that being spread all over the Commonwealth and having so many email addresses that we can publicize things. It's one of the things we do. We can so let people know. We also have a Sacred Spaces Commission. This means I have people around the Commonwealth looking and helping us to connect with churches, cemeteries, and schools in their localities, so we can begin to focus in and help find people to advise them through the process. So this is perfect timing, because we must not allow our sacred spaces to be lost. In our faith tradition, we believe that those who have gone before us still see and know what we are doing. We believe that one never goes away as long as they are remembered. So the desecration of any of those sacred spaces is an affront to all that we have lived and died for. And as a people who has given so much of our blood is in the land, our work, our labor, that now you disturb that resting place, and that's just too much. So you'll be hearing from us. And I think my contact information is in there, and Dora, of course, we'll be working with you closely and all the things you do to promote that everybody should have all that they should have in this land.
Thank you so much. And Chris, if you want to share what's next for you, absolutely. Working hand in hand, Eli, hand in hand.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of synergy here between folks. I did not dive into the grave issues on the Brown Grove front, but it's most certainly there too. On the property that's to be developed, there are unmarked graves according to oral traditions of the community. So we've got a lot of struggles there. There's a lot of parallels people here saw between a proposed casino site in Chesterfield County that a community was dealing with the same exact issues. So yeah, there's a lot of issues, a lot of parallels. I think that for our part, anything we can do to help kind of share our story and experiences so that others can kind of, not start from scratch, we're open to those possibilities. So, I mean, certainly keep me in the loop with what you guys are doing. The historic district, I think it's only the second one like this in the entire state, focused on a Freeman African American established community like this. And so I think that there's something there that this group may want to begin talking to your members, your various contacts about doing such things, even though he has exercised absolutely no leadership on this issue. Governor Northam is doing a lot now to try to perpetuate and promote African-American experiences in the state. And this is a big focus for the Historic Resources Department. So the folks that we've worked with may be positioned to help other people do similar things. Getting the churches registered if they are of substantial age on the National Historic Registers. Big deal, because if this is happening in your backyard or right across the street, you have to look at the impact of those type of resources. So those are some of the advice I would give to folks right now. Unfortunately, it's all going legal, and it's nothing anybody wanted. I mean, that's the unfortunate thing, is if you enjoy going to court, you're probably a lawyer. That's the only other person I know that actually goes out here and enjoys doing this type of thing. But we're at the point of where it seems the only remedy, because nobody politically cares. They want the jobs. That's all they're focused on. That's it. So the political avenues are basically done for us. The only avenues that we're stuck with right now, I see, because the agencies are short-circuiting their own regulatory requirement programs, is litigation. And I don't say this lightly. I'm an environmental professional. I've been doing this type of work for 25 years. I have never in my professional experience of working across the country seen a more messed up permitting effort in my life. And pipeline permits are far better ran than this one. So that says a lot. So that's my personal perspective. You guys take it for what it is. But I think once we get through this, it's going to be interesting. As of right now, we will be the first to legally utilize the Virginia Environmental Justice Act with a state water control board action. And so one way or the other, if we win or lose, we are establishing legal precedents in the state of Virginia with this. So
I thank you. I felt like you were giving us some policy homework dealing with the permitting process. That was part of one of the issues here in Prince William County. The Scott Cemetery that was bulldozed, the owner didn't even get a permit to clear the land. And quite frankly, even if he had gotten a permit, the records of the cemetery weren't in the database where they needed to be accessed by the permitting department to even prevent him from bulldozing the cemetery. So thank you for that. There's definitely some policy work. Definitely, but we definitely want to begin with trying to protect and preserve these spaces. Sheila, with that, you can share sort of what's next for you.
Well, we'll be participating in Juneteenth celebrations in Loudoun County and in Prince William County. And we're just going to keep on this fight. And absolutely right, it's coming to a legal battle. Unfortunately, you try to do things in the correct way, but you know, it ends up in the courtroom, and so trying to be able to afford these attorneys is another problem. To get legal representation is an expensive thing, you know, and we trying to raise money, and we find good attorneys that are willing to come out here and fight, but their fees are thousands and thousands of dollars. So I know Mr. French probably has the say. It's frustrating. It's frustrating to know that, but I guess we'll see them in court. You know, we've tried to take this to the state and federal realms, because there are laws, state and federal, that protect cemeteries. And in fact, let's go back to the Scott Cemetery. It's a cemetery. It was bought at a tax sale. That land was bought at a tax sale by the brewery. Cemeteries aren't taxed. How did that happen? That's a big question. Lots of questions. The area, the land around the Fletcher Allen, when they researched that deed, how did people who were in the spirit world for 2, 3 years and 10 years sign the deed? So the acquisition of these lands to developers is really questionable. And, that's Prince William County doesn't want to seem to deal with any of it. Oh, they were within their rights. Oh, they were within their rights. No, they weren't.
No, they
No,
were.
absolutely not. So on the federal thing, we have NAGPRA, which protects Native American grave sites and the removal of anything from those grave sites. So we'll be looking into those things, and the fight continues. All across this land, the fight continues, and we must protect our Mother Earth. Our Mother Earth is the giver of all life. Without our Mother Earth and all that she provides for us, or we wouldn't be here. So that's where we are. We'll just keep on and getting stronger and marching with their brothers and sisters and getting stronger and let our voice be heard.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all again for your time and for sharing. And as Shiv said, the fight continues. And so that I want to go into sort of my closing thought. I'm going to close with the image. So I want to say goodbye to you all. This is the last time you all will see us four. The image I want to close on for my closing thought is the Juneteenth flag. And so before I do that, again, just my heartfelt thanks for you all and your strength and your courage to do this work. I'm hoping that everyone who is watching with us today or will watch this recording afterwards will join us. Again, this is not an individual fight. This is not one community fight. This is truly a collective fight. And so thank you again. I'm going to share my screen and talk about the flag and talk about Juneteenth for a minute. And then we'll wrap up. I think, am I doing this right? Not sure. Okay, so as we all know, well, you may not know, I'm not sure. Juneteenth was made a federal holiday this week. And so it was made a federal holiday in Virginia last year. And so this is, people don't realize there is actually an official Juneteenth flag. In 1997, activist Ben Haith, founder of the National Juneteenth Celebration Foundation, he worked with some collaborators to create this flag. It was designed and then revised in 2000. And so, of course, June 19th represents the date that the last set of slaves were informed that 2 years prior, there was a general order to abolish slavery in the United States, and that was done in Galveston, Texas. And so the star in the middle is reflective of Texas, but there's an arc, the colors are red, white, and blue to reflect the American flag, and that, the freedmen were also Americans was the thought behind that. But I want to focus on the burst that outlines the star. It's supposed to represent a nova or a new star, and it's meant to represent sort of a new beginning for African Americans across America. And so what was interesting, and I don't want to claim that I knew this actually was shared with me from our communications director at the center, Aisha Taylor, and she shared that even though the passing of the federal law to make it a federal holiday, Senator Tillis, who was one of the co-sponsors, because it was a bipartisan, he also co-sponsored the legislation to ban critical race theory. And so the contradiction of that really speaks to this moment, because this work that we're doing to preserve the history, to make sure that communities are not wiped out from history and from remembrance, it's important that as we celebrate Juneteenth and observe the abolition of slavery, and that it represents freedom. It's often called freedom. It's celebrated on June 19th. So tomorrow is actually the official day. But it's not just looking at the past. I want to really encourage people to look at the contemporary injustices, because as Sheila said, the fight continues. And so we celebrate culture, we celebrate freedom, but let's also be united to really continue this fight, because there are injustices that we are facing today that's still rooted in the past of slavery and genocide. And so I just wanted to leave us with that thought. And again, I thank you all for engaging us today. And I hope that you will engage us as the fight continues. So thank you. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.